Cheers everyone, and welcome to a video, or rather the start of a series I've been wanting to make for a while now. As you may see from the title, it's the start of the Everything Wrong with the Law of miniseries, or as someone commented on my last video, ew. So I'll be rolling with that. Basically, this series is gonna have 4 episodes. One for each SpellForce game that has law inaccuracies in it. Faith and Destiny, Demons of the Past, and both the SpellForce 3 games. Before I begin, let me quickly set a precedent for this. As some of you know, I don't consider any SpellForce game that was released after Dragonstorm canon, because all of them have a story and lore that contradicts the first 5 SpellForce games, official SpellForce short stories, and the official prequel books, these here. Just for those wondering, it says the official prequels up here, but sadly they are only officially available in German, which is not an excuse for the developers of SpellForce 3 specifically, because Grimlore Games is a German company, they could have read it. Anyhow, those elements of SpellForce are what is canon to me and many others, not because they were written by the original author or heavily advised by him, but because things add up and make sense. What I'm gonna criticize are not bits of the aforementioned games that were new and that I personally dislike or would like to have seen differently, but actual facts that they got wrong with evidence for it. Just to say up front, I do not care about some people saying, "Oh, the games are canon because they are part of the series." That means nothing to me, and it's just an excuse to cover up how the developers after Phenomic didn't give a crap about the story. Another argument I've read online is that the games are canon because the original author of the series helped with the story, which is true, but not really. I've talked to Arne personally regarding the story of what came after Dragonstorm, and he actually said that he's glad that my videos here don't include those as canon, because they came from entirely different sources and are not really connected to what he wrote. That's a quote of his. And if the guy who came up with the idea of SpellForce isn't right, then who is? I will not post our conversation here because you shouldn't post private messages online, but you can't take my word for that. I have people who can back it up as well. Also, some of you might say that the games I'm talking about are just a reimagining of the SpellForce universe, which I have to sadly disagree with because THQ Nordic, the publisher themselves, has been insisting since Faith and Destiny that all of the games are in fact canon and part of the same universe, so that's why this video needed to be made. Now, I know I started this off a bit harsh, and I will probably continue in this tone. Please know that everything I say in this video doesn't come from a place of hate. I love and care about the SpellForce series. I've been a fan since 2003 and have played and read everything there is to it multiple times, even the smallest of details. I want to see the series do well, but it saddens me that such a great universe which could honestly compete with the likes of Warcraft and The Witcher gets neglected and mistreated so much recently. This video isn't here to tell you that what came after Dragonstorm is shit and you shouldn't touch it. No. If you like the gameplay and what it has to offer, by all means, get those games. They can be a lot of fun sometimes, but don't expect the lore in them to make sense. So with all of that out of the way, let's start with SpellForce 3, the 2017 entry of the series. I can't guarantee that I'll mention every single little detail that's wrong, but I hope that I'll get the biggest offenders out of the way. And remember, some of you may like the version of events depicted in SpellForce 3. That's fine, and that's not the point. If they wanted to make up their own story, they could have made a new game instead of messing up the lore here and effectively spitting in the face of old fans who have been waiting for a proper addition to the lore since 2007. So, the first issue with the lore of SpellForce 3 happens in the intro cinematic, where Noria says the following line.
"We know war. It has been at our side for millennia, coming and going with the indifference of the tides."
Sorry Noria, but it hasn't been. SpellForce 3 is supposed to take place in 518 BC. Millennia means a period of 1,000 years. Humans still lived in caves 1,000 years ago in the SpellForce universe. It's barely been 500 years since they started freeing Io from the dragons and settling on it properly. This is later reinforced by Bertrand mentioning how someone built the walls of Greyfell thousands of years ago. Greyfell is 500 years old at the very best. The history of the humans was described on the old Phenomic website under the race descriptions. I still have access to those, so you bet THQ Nordic does as well. There's also a very few good points a fan makes on the Steam forums. 6,542 years? No matter how you twist it, this number just doesn't make sense. I would recommend checking his post out, and I'll link it in the description below. And sticking with Greyfell, why does the Queen rule from there? The game is supposed to be based on the official short story, The Lance of Kings, but Greyfell is never mentioned there. The Hibernians, since the start of the Empire, ruled from Ankbrand, a city located close to here. It's described in the books and mentioned that Ankbrand is the city of kings, a name by which the city is mentioned in the short story as well. Furthermore, it makes no sense for her to rule from Greyfield, the seat of the House of Wolfgar. Wolfgar was one of the royal houses that rebelled against the crown during the Mage Wars. It was also mentioned in the short story. And now she just rules from there? Doesn't make much sense in my opinion, does it? Speaking of Hibernians, why are they portrayed as some ancient race that lived thousands of years ago in SpellForce 3 when the Empire only started existing at 940 before the Convocation and collapsed 200 years before the events of SpellForce 3? They were normal humans, didn't look special, weren't taller, had no special buildings or language, they were just part of an empire that collapsed. It's like me saying that the people who lived in the Habsburg monarchy were an ancient race. I mean, come on. And to finish them off, why are the Lost Islands in SpellForce 3 located north of the shore of Northander? They are literally here on the official world map, I mean, come on. It just required them to look at it once. And the people living there should also be just normal humans, no special Hibernian human mixed race. And the purity of light thing that was depicted in SpellForce 3 really had no time or place to happen. In the books, it's described that after the Mage Wars ended, there was indeed a ban on magic on all of EO, which lasted 1 year, and then the Circle was founded. But that 1 year was described as peaceful with no major issues during it. I'm sure there might have been a few disturbances, but no real wars. And now to address the members of the Circle in SpellForce 3. Now, I get what they were trying to do. Give each of them a sad backstory, make them more down to earth and likable, I get that, I do. But that doesn't make sense in the context of what the Circle is supposed to be. The members of the Circle were all the very best mages a respective race had to offer, top of everyone else among them. It makes sense that way because the Circle needed power to have authority. Pretty much everyone in SpellForce 3 is a vagabond or outcast, and there's no real reason whatsoever that they would be good candidates for such a group. In the original lore, Isgrim was the most powerful stone shaper of Windhelm before he joined the Circle. In SpellForce 3, he's an archaeologist who says for himself that he's bad at magic. Iria was the best priestess of light in Finon Mia and not exiled from there. The Circle was, in the canon lore, founded by all the races in agreement and acted independently from any ruler with the job of controlling magic and mages on EO, while in SpellForce 3, they are bowing down to the Queen. Both of these things just defeat the whole purpose of why it came together in the first place. I don't see why any race would respect their authority this way. And by the way, most of this information can be learned from Darius in Leonon 1 hour after playing the Order of Dawn. It just shows how much research the developers did before writing the story for SpellForce 3. Now let's talk about Molandia, since they didn't get that right either. Molandia did not exist before the Circle was founded. It was built by Isgrim afterwards, and for a good reason. The city was built on top of a demonic rift, which the Circle and other powerful mages wanted to explore and research on. You can even play in that rift in the Order of Dawn. It's a main mission in the campaign, so if they played the Order of Dawn, they must have played through that mission. It was never a Shaper city to begin with, and like I said, it didn't exist until after the Circle was founded. More evidence for that was Udvin's expedition in SpellForce 1 in the side quest. He lived at a time before the Circle, and went to explore the rift. Wouldn't he have noticed a massive city above it if it existed? And the Shapers themselves are weird looking, I have to say it like that. We actually do see how Shapers look like in SpellForce 2 Dragonstorm. They look like taller humans with elven ears, which makes sense yet again, seeing as the Shapers regressed into the humans, elves and dwarfs through the 40,000 years they hid away from the dragons. This is explicitly stated in a SpellForce 2 Dragonstorm loading screen. Pause here to read it if you want. In SpellForce 3, they are essentially full energy mystic beings that glow for some reason. Alien-like, which makes it just much more unlikely that they would eventually become what is now humans, elves and dwarves. And now the races themselves, in particular orcs and elves. Let's do the elves first. The elves in Northander were no exiles from Finon Mia. It was stated back on the official Phenomic website under race descriptions that after the War of the Six Races ended, the elves started moving out of Finon Mia in smaller clans to spread across Fiara, eventually settling in Northander as well. Furthermore, the actual Morhir elves are the ones in Dun Mora we see in SpellForce 2 Shadow Wars. And why are the humans so hostile towards the elf in SpellForce 3? They were allies about 80 years ago when the War of the Six Races ended. They are pretty tight at this point, if you know what I mean. Also, I do recall that SpellForce 3 mentions that the War of the Six Races ended 600 years before the events of SpellForce 3. It ended 600 years before the events of SpellForce 1. Just goes to show how shallow their analysis of the universe was. They saw a number in the Order of Dawn and plastered it into their game. Now the orcs. The tribes mentioned in SpellForce 3 just don't make sense. There were 2 orc tribes on Fiara that settled there after the War of the Six Races ended. The tribe of the Iron Lord in the Highmark, which we see in SpellForce 2, and the Grog clan, which was the one inhabiting the northern lands of Fiara, among other locations on EO. They were there since 600 BC, all the way into the events of SpellForce 1. I'm not really sure what kind of identity crisis they had at 518 BC according to SpellForce 3. It's beyond me. And trolls as well. Why are they so huge? This isn't Lord of the Rings. The trolls were made when Zarach shaped some wild beasts to his will. He deformed them, but he didn't make them 5 times their actual size. They would die if he had done that. There's an official short story by Phenomic called The Darkest Shore that describes trolls a bit. I would highly advise reading before writing. Now, let's talk about the Iron Falcons and how underwhelming they were in SpellForce 3. Since the Order of Dawn, the Falcons are described as the best warriors of the light races, donned in armor that was designed by Neathalf himself. This is no doubt the best armor on EO for the best warriors on EO. They're wearing rags in SpellForce 3, let's be honest. Also, they can't fight for shit. A few undead scared them off when in SpellForce 2 it was said that these very Iron Falcons that lived during that time managed to push back the Black Legion, the scariest army the Dark Races ever had, and the personal guard of the Fiel Dog. Speaking of these undead, how can they even break the seal on Aeonia's blade? It was mentioned in the books that the reason for the Falcons eventually abandoning their guard after hundreds of years was because the barrier was just too safe. Nothing could realistically break into it, and from 600 BC until around 35 BC nothing did. It's clearly stated. Around 35 BC, Wraith, the Circle Mage, managed to open it for a little bit by using all of his knowledge and Archfire power, and he almost died while doing so how does a few measly undead manage to do it so easily? And while we're talking about impossible feats, how on EO does Rhonda manage to create the Iron Ones, or Blades if you want to call them like that? In the original lore, Håkon Ashir was the only one who managed to do it, and now count with me. With 500 years of experience, the knowledge of the Zerbite Order on Xu, the knowledge of the Circle, the power of the Archfire, and the mask of Belial, a demigod, and he still needed hundreds of years to figure it out. Rhonda Lacane, on the other hand, had a vision from Aeonia, no significant powers, and few years of experience under his belt at best? Riddle me that one in the comments, please, I need to know. Ah yes, and this vision from Aeonia he had. How did that celestial monster from outside of EO manage to break in? It's the job of the Guardians to prevent those things from happening, and they have been for tens of thousands of years, with the only slip-up they had being when they were deceived and the Shadows managed to enter EO completely around 17 AC. They had a completely clean record before that. So is it not logical that, if a monster was trying to break into EO like that, they would do something about it? After all, it was one of the tasks Aeonia gave them. So yeah. And before I end my rant, there are 2 more things that I have on my list. The Godstones in SpellForce 3. Now, I get that they're a gameplay mechanic, but in the SpellForce universe they are also a very, very important lore tool. After the Convocation, the only pieces of land which were left standing were those around the Godstones, but with how many there are in SpellForce 3, I can't see any part of EO being destroyed. There were better options. There's also a reason why the previous SpellForce games had different fast travel tools, and I won't even touch on how they changed them visually, just why. And last but not least, Angar Arendir. Well, it may have just been a strange name coincidence, but in the canon lore, he wasn't an army commander, he was a bard, the greatest bard to have ever lived in fact. All of this is mentioned in the SpellForce 1 free game mode. I don't know if they just saw the name and used it, but well, this is what we got. And that would conclude what I have to say regarding SpellForce. Again, even though I'm ranting here, it isn't meant to be hate. It's constructive criticism aimed at THQ Nordic to show them what they did wrong and what they need to improve. Do it right if you want to make more SpellForce games. The community is always there to help you with things you are unsure of, and by the looks of it, there's a lot of things you are unsure of. If you want to have a different story, make a new IP instead. As simple as that. I don't know, I'm just really sad and disappointed that no SpellForce game since Dragonstorm contributed to the lore, and if no one says anything about it, the next potential SpellForce game won't make things any better. But no, I'm gonna sign off right here. If there's anything I missed that SpellForce 3 got wrong, let me know in the comments and let's discuss. If you disagree with what I said here, let me know as well and let's see why. Thanks everyone for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.